Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today on our session regarding strategies to strengthen your team through staff engagement. I am Michelle Schneider, and my co-presenter today is Tasha McDaniel, and we're both from Ascendium Education Solutions. And you'll hear from Tasha a little bit later, but what we are going to do is a couple of things. We're going to go ahead and go off camera during our session today, but we'll be back on at the end, and we will take questions throughout. So please feel free to put your questions into the chat feature. So without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and share my screen and bring up the session today. So bear with me just a second here. All right. Well, again, I'd like to welcome you all. We know that recruiting the right employees and keeping the right employees matters, especially as you compete for the best talent. Now, satisfaction is only one facet of employee engagement. Employee engagement is based on trust, integrity, two-way commitment, and communication between an organization and those that belong to that organization. And it's an approach that increases the chances of business success, which contributes to not only a better individual performance in terms of productivity and well-being, but also overall organizational success. Now, although the concepts of employee engagement and job satisfaction are somewhat interrelated, they're not synonymous. Job satisfaction has more to do with whether somebody is personally happy than with whether or not the person is actively involved in advancing the organization's goals. So, why do people leave? Well, number one is poor relationship with the boss. Now, people don't need to be friends with their boss, but they do need to have a relationship because your supervisor is too much of an integral part of your daily life at work to have that relationship be uncomfortable. So, to have a toxic relationship with someone to whom you report can undermine somebody's engagement, confidence, and commitment. Another, of course, is being bored and unchallenged by the work that you're doing. Nobody wants to be bored. We spend more than a third of our days working and getting ready for work and even commuting to work. And when somebody leaves the organization, every email that is sent to say goodbye usually includes a comment about passionate coworkers that the employee cares about and will miss. Second only to the employee's manager, the coworkers with whom somebody sits, interacts, and serves with on teams are critical components of an employee's work environment. Now, research from the Gallup organization indicates that one of the 12 factors that illuminate whether somebody is happy on their job or not is having a best friend at work. Tasha's mine. So I'm very, very fortunate. Relationships with coworkers retain employees. Now, when employees use their skills and abilities on the job, they feel a sense of pride, they feel a sense of accomplishment, and self confidence because people want to develop and they want to grow their skills. This includes opportunities, though, for upward mobility. In other words, if somebody cannot see a path to continued growth in their current organization, they're likely to look elsewhere for a career development or promotional opportunity. Another is their contribution to the organization's goals overall. Everybody should understand the relevance of their job and its key contributions and deliverables to the overall strategy and business plan of the organization because everybody wants to feel connected and that what they're doing is bigger than simply, doing their job, right? We all want to make sure that we're doing more than just, spinning the wheel. Another reason is autonomy and independence on the job. Organizations talk about things like empowerment or autonomy and independence, but they don't always create the work environment that enables people to do this. And that takes me to the next reason, which is meaningfulness. We all want something that isn't busy work or transactional, something that contributes to the bigger picture. And with some areas, such as cancer research or feeding the hungry, animal rescue, the meaning is obvious. But sometimes people need help connecting to why their work has meaning. Another, of course, and this is a big one, is financial instability. Things like a lack of sales or low enrollment, layoffs, reduced work hours, salary freezes, or even successful competitors highlighted in the news, employee turnover. Things like that all lead to somebody's feeling of instability and a lack of trust. And let's face it, people who are worried, what do? Well, they tend to leave, especially if there's no transparency. Because after all, they have the financial stability of their own families to consider when they decide whether or not to stay. And while it's not the top item on the list, the overall culture also makes a difference. Is the environment conducive to employee satisfaction and engagement? Are there events, employee activities, celebrations, and team building efforts that make people feel like it's a great place to work? And finally, being recognized and appreciated. Many people place employee recognition further up on the list, but this is where recognition scored in a recent Society for Human Resources Management or SHRM survey of employees. Where it fell, because a lack of recognition can affect many of the other factors that we just listed, especially culture, but it's probably not like the sole reason somebody's going to leave their job. A recent study by Hewitt revealed that employee engagement dipped for the first time in many years. There was a Trends in Global Employee Engagement report, which covered more than 5 million employees at over 1,000 organizations around the world. And it showed that less than 1/4 of employees are highly engaged and 39% are moderately engaged. Well, why does that matter? According to the same research, a 5-point increase in employee engagement is linked to a 3-point increase in revenue growth in the subsequent year. So when engagement levels drop, the opposite happens. The study cites consequences such as higher turnover, steeper absenteeism, lower customer satisfaction, and ultimately poor financial performance. So managers need to identify staff with a propensity to be engaged and make sure that they hire the right staff in the first place. So we're seeing a new workforce, one that's younger, more demanding, and more dynamic than ever. So Deloitte Consulting's survey of over 2,500 organizations in more than 90 countries identified 12 critical trends that are driving the human capital agenda. And in that survey, employee engagement was in the top 4 of those trends. The main report discussed how companies should redefine their engagement strategy to move from keeping people to attracting them and creating a passionate and compassionate place to work. So, what exactly is employee engagement? Well, we're going to go into some detail on that today. We'll also share ways that leadership can build and strengthen employee engagement. And finally, we'll review results that come from having a more involved, more focused team. The Harvard Business Review recently referenced employee engagement as the holy grail of today's workplace. Many companies are investing heavily to identify what leads to high engagement because they want to, of course, motivate people and increase their happiness and productivity. Engagement is, it's often a rather ambiguous term. Depending on how it's measured, engagement could be a number of things. It could represent job satisfaction coupled with emotional investment in whatever the work is, willingness to invest discretionary effort, or even advocating for the organization as a good place to work. So one could argue that continuing to invest in improving employee engagement would have a positive return on their investment. So, what exactly is the definition? Well, employee engagement is the extent to which employees feel passionate about their jobs, they're committed to the organization, and they put discretionary effort into their work. Employee engagement is the emotional commitment that the person has to the organization and its goals. It means engaged employees actually care about their work and they care about the company they work for. They're not doing it just for a paycheck or, looking for the next promotion, but they're actually working on behalf of the organization's goals. That means the engaged computer programmer works overtime when needed without being asked. It means the engaged manager might step in to help a colleague, even though that means more on their plate. It also could mean that the frontline staff member will answer that ringing phone, even though they have their coat on and they're ready to walk out the door for the day. The market research firm Opinion Research Corporation's analysis revealed 6 distinct categories of employees, and they described them in the following ways. And we've probably worked with people in each of these categories. There's somebody who's the engaged employee, somebody who's got a lot of confidence in their leadership and in their leadership team, and they feel a great sense of accomplishment. We also have people that tend to be somewhat of a laggard, the most disengaged employees. They don't plan to leave, but they tend to do their work kind of half heartedly and they make a lot of careless mistakes. Then you have somebody that's comfy. And these are employees who have no intention of leaving their work environment, but they get little sense of accomplishment from their work, so they don't feel valued, yet they rarely complain. We also have people who are ambivalent, and these are people who lack a connection with the job or the organization. We also have saboteurs, employees who tend to be very negative and they say bad things about the organization itself. And then we have people that tend to be somewhat what we call, or what they called, promiscuous. People who are positive and proud of their organization, they put in the effort, yet they might leave because they tend to be motivated by money or personal development, but they lack, and this is the important piece of this, they lack the emotional connection with the organization. So some people will fit into one or even more of these, but most will tend to have a dominant one. And it can be difficult to move somebody from a saboteur to a highly engaged person, but it can be done. So the terms engagement and job satisfaction, as I mentioned, are often used interchangeably, but research has revealed that although there's some overlap in the drivers of engagement and satisfaction, there are also key differences in the components that determine each. Now, some experts define engagement in terms of an employee's feelings and behavior. Engaged employees might report feeling focused and intensely involved in the work that they do, and they're enthusiastic. Engaged behavior is persistent, proactive, and adaptive in ways that expand the job roles as necessary. So, engaged employees, and this is the difference, they go beyond their job description. So, for example, engaged employees might feel focused and have kind of a sense of urgency on how they concentrate on something or how they approach what they do. Satisfied employees feel pleasant and content and gratified. So, an engaged staff member might go the extra mile when working with a customer. Let's say they're working with a customer who's got a bill and they've got a lot of questions. Instead of just calling the accounting department and transferring the call, they actually set that call up by doing what's called a soft handoff, where they say, okay, here's so and so, this is what their problem is. Give the accounting department a little bit of time to look it up before you put that customer on the line. So that's what an engaged staff member does. Whereas a satisfied one, they might say, oh, I'm really sorry you're having that issue. And they'll be really super nice to the customer, but they won't go that extra mile. Employee engagement is about proactively and passionately adding value while also aligning with the mission. Now, this can be hard to quantify, but an engaged employee wears it on their face. They demonstrate it in their attitude and in their workplace communication. So, employee engagement is the key to activating a high performing workforce because engaged employees lead to higher service, quality, and productivity, which leads to greater customer satisfaction because customers feel you care because you do. That leads to repeat business, or from a retention standpoint, it leads to retaining the people that you have and happier customers and staff, which leads to higher staff morale and an increase in profits. Now, you cannot cross the sea merely by standing and staring at the water. In other words, thinking or wishing something would be different. Tasha and I both live in Florida. We both just had Hurricane Milton come to pay us a visit less than 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene. And boy, we were wishing and thinking and hoping that that wouldn't happen. But that's not going to change things, right? So, wishing or thinking something would be different will not make things different or bring about change. You have to take action behind it. So, since groups of employees are influenced by different combinations of factors throughout your organization, managers need to carefully consider what steps are most relevant to their department. So, let's explore some suggestions to kind of facilitate some ideas for you. And at this point, I'm going to pass it to Tasha, and she's going to talk about ways leadership can build and strengthen employee engagement. Tasha?
Okay, thank you so much. And I also would like to welcome all of you to our session today. So, as Michelle mentioned, we've defined employee engagement. Now we want to take a look at ways in which leaders can build and strengthen their teams. But before we begin, we would like to hear your thoughts on engagement. And the question is, what would make you feel more engaged in your job? So I'm going to invite you to share your thoughts on this question. You can share your comments into the chat. That would be great. If you have any just thoughts, just any ideas, any of those things that would just make you more enthusiastic and more engaged in your job. You have a magic wand, so now's the time. Okay. Someone said set aside time required um, for professional development, money, absolutely. Anyone else? You have a blank canvas and you can put down anything that you want that would make you feel more engaged in your job. What would it be? We have money, we have set aside time for professional development. Anyone else? What would make you more engaged? Okay, actually, to do my job role instead of all of the other small things. Yes. Direct feedback on a regular basis from management. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Someone said yes, what Ashley said. Yeah, I agree. That's fantastic. Anyone else? What would make you feel more engaged in your job? So I often feel too engaged in my job with an incredible amount of responsibilities and no time to get it all done. But I would feel more joyful with a larger team, spreading the love and a better team culture. So thank you so much for sharing, the different things that would make you more engaged in your job. And these are great responses. And as you can see, we're all enticed by a variety of different things, whether it's money, whether it's, just having regular feedback. Someone mentioned professional development. Um, as you can see, just a variety of different things that entice us or motivate us to be more engaged. And that's because we have different motivators that drive our levels of enthusiasm and boost our engagement at our workplaces. So thank you so much for sharing. Well, engagement really should begin during the recruitment or interview process by ensuring the candidate fits with the organization's culture. However, once the new person is hired, engaging them on the first day is essential. After all, you want your new hires to feel welcome. to feel valued and prepared for their new employee orientation. Now, effective employee onboarding is not just a good idea, it's critical. Far too often, new hires show up on the first day bright eyed and just enthused, but they may leave confused or overwhelmed due to inept onboarding. A study by an HR software company found that 16% of new hires leave after the first week and 17% after the first 30 days. And what's interesting is that many of the respondents said that they would have preferred that their own managers either facilitated or were at least involved in the onboarding process, not just human resources. Direct supervisors can enhance the onboarding experience by applying best practices to new employees, to the job, to the work environment, and to their coworkers. Now, orientation programs are more effective when they are structured and strategic and facilitate opportunities for new hires to share and ask questions. So, the environment really should be set up for two-way dialogue, not just a program focused on processes and paperwork. Now, an employee is hired because they demonstrate the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job. However, you think about the way you do things at one employment location, it may be different at another employment. So the way they did things previously may not be the same because every organization has unique values and practices and norms and a language and traditions. And these components make up the organization culture. And collectively, they define the way of life in that organization and the appropriate behavior that's expected. So the onboarding process really should acclimate new employees to the organizational culture so that they understand how things are done beyond the job duties and responsibilities, those things that are not necessarily written down or in stone or in a process and procedures manual, so that people are aware of the way they really should behave and the appropriate behavior that's expected with that particular employer. Now, Quantum Workplace, which is the research firm, you're probably familiar with the Best Places to Work program, they identified five key factors that set organizations with higher engagement scores apart from others. So these organizations have higher engagement across the board, and they have best practices that they tend to all have. And these practices include they set a clear and compelling direction that empowers each employee. They engage in open and honest communication. They maintain a focus on career growth and development. They recognize and reward high performance. And they provide employee benefits that demonstrate a strong commitment to the employee's well being outside of the workplace. Now, although Generation Zs, Gen Zs, and they're entering into the workplace, millennials are still the largest working generation. And as more baby boomers continue to retire, it's estimated that by 2030, millennials and Gen Zs could make up as much as 75% of the workforce. And while it is important to engage staff from all generations, employers really should already have engagement strategies tailored to these two groups because research suggests that many of them are driven by things such as open communication, having a great workplace culture. They want an organization that's involved with causes and achieving purpose and fulfillment. Now, employees who feel disconnected and disengaged are more likely to have negative things to say about their workplace. And if a disengaged employee leaves or they're terminated, they may use social media platforms to vent their frustrations. And negative feedback tends to be more magnified than positive. We tend to remember the negative oftentimes than we do the positive. So, an organization's reputation and credibility could be damaged due to just a single disgruntled employee. Now, conversely, engaged employees are more likely to have positive things to say about where they work. Employee engagement brings value through greater creativity, productivity, and efficiency. And it also generates higher retention, positivity, and satisfaction. Engaged staff are usually effective communicators as they have been found to show more interest in others and they're more willing to assist with problem solving and mentoring their colleagues and coworkers and just generating great ideas. Now, employers really are the ones responsible for creating a culture of engagement. And when they do, engage employees tend to foster a customer centric environment where internal and external customers are satisfied. Now, more organizations are really paying attention to the connection between employee engagement and the customer experience through a variety of efforts. And one that we want to share with you is a strategy that's called the 5 I's of engagement. And that's inform, inspire, instruct, involve, and incent. So we're going to go through each of these 5 I's of employee engagement, beginning with the first one, and that's inform. Now, when you think about it, no one likes to be blindsided. And I'm sure, all of us probably can remember a time or a situation where we've been given, a last minute kind of hurry it up and get it done assignment that maybe others have known about for a while. And now we've been brought in on the back end. And if we'd been kept in the loop from the very beginning, we could have provided some valuable insight and had the assignment well underway and not feel so rushed to try to get it done quickly. So keeping staff informed is very important for productivity, for trust building, and again, it does impact their engagement. So management really should provide consistent and frequent interactions to keep their staff aware and up to date. The next I is for inspire. A person's leadership style has a significant impact on the performance of their staff, and connections to others through strong leadership really are key. Leaders should nurture and mentor staff and be willing to just get in the trenches with them. Employees are more inspired when they are led by example. Also, engagement tends to increase a lot more when managers provide strong leadership but still give employees elbow room or just autonomy to do their jobs. No one likes to be micromanaged either. Staff engagement is not just simply about the relationship between the manager and its team members, it's also about the organizational culture. The third I is for instruct. According to a recent retention report by the Work Institute, lack of career development is one of the leading reasons why people leave their jobs. And I know that someone mentioned that that's something that would make them more engaged is just to have time required for professional development. Because many of us, if not most of us, we really do want the desire, to have the opportunity rather, to grow and to have achievement and to have security. So it's important for employers and for managers to provide professional development opportunities, whether it's training, whether it's formal education, whatever it might be, based on the staff's needs. Management should also look for ways for staff to demonstrate their proficiency by training others. So the next I is for involve. And as we shared earlier, committed rather, and engaged staff, they tend to bring substantial benefits to the workplace. And we recognize that formal relationships just can't be activated without intentional effort. Implicit employer employee exchanges do matter. So, receiving and sharing feedback is critical. Management should routinely solicit input, and it doesn't always have to be a formal process. It could be something as simple as a check in, just a simple check in to gauge the temperature by asking questions such as, how are you doing? Are you able to manage your workload? Is it impacting your personal life? What do you need to do your work more effectively? And even during the annual review process, it may be helpful to ask for self identified benchmarks. Now, staff surveys are a great and valuable tool to obtain employee feedback. And there's a variety of categories that you can include in staff surveys, such as communication. You find out about their performance, the workplace resources, as well as these that we have listed on the next two slides. So, feedback questions really do help to determine if employees feel the evaluation process is fair and appropriate. Do they feel as though they're able to contribute to the process? And what is their perception of the organization's goal setting practices? Now, opportunities for growth questions. These type of questions enable staff to share whether they feel encouraged to grow and learn from their mistakes. Do they find their work stimulating, challenging, and rewarding? And do they receive adequate training and development opportunities? Now, teamwork questions help to analyze the team's dynamics and how they feel about it. Now, survey questions on an employee's work-life balance these are very, very important to have, to be able to gauge their stress levels and the pace. Do they believe that work-life balance is encouraged? Are they able to satisfy their job and personal responsibilities? And then quality and customer focus questions can provide feedback on their perceptions regarding the importance of customer and quality service. And the last type of survey question that can be included is just several questions, that can gather insight into the level of fairness and whether they feel that there's fairness that is applied to them or given to them and to others. So these type of questions in an employee survey or a staff evaluation can help to assess what's working and what's not, and just areas of deficiencies. Employee surveys can boost engagement because it increases staff involvement and it solicits their input, and in doing so, it reinforces their value. Because we all feel more important when we know that our voices are heard. Now, the last I is for incent. A one size fits all approach typically doesn't work, right? Therefore, workplaces really should try to somewhat customize their policies and practices to meet the needs of different groups of employees. Engagement and enablement through an understanding of their roles and a supportive environment, it really energizes people. So together they develop a stronger sense of personal well being and a desire to make things better. Employee engagement thrives when recognition and appreciation are embedded. So it's a part of the culture. It's not just a one time activity that's done once a quarter or once a year, it's really a part of the culture. And there are formal and informal ways to incentivize staff. Informal methods could just be celebrating their accomplishments and milestones, whereas you have performance based rewards. They're more formal ways to commend achievements, but certainly it's really important to make sure that recognizing and celebrating employees really is a part of the overall organizational culture. Now, research demonstrates that employee engagement increases substantially when they have daily or routinely positive experiences with their direct supervisors or managers. And management behaviors that tend to correlate with engagement include employee knows the relationship with they enjoy it rather. They have a great relationship. They enjoy it with their direct supervisor. Now, we all know what it's like to work with someone that we just don't click with, right? Or someone who has a management style that just does not mesh well with ours. But when it's a good relationship, that's when we value the relationship and we enjoy it. The next management behavior is that employee understands what is expected of them. The next is employee has the necessary equipment and resources to do the job well. So, for example, having up to date technology. Employee has the authority to make work decisions. Engagement increases when staff feel empowered and supported. And the last management behavior that tends to correlate with engagement is when employees have an opportunity to grow professionally. And as I shared a few slides ago, lack of career development is a leading reason why people leave their jobs. So at this time, I'm going to turn it back to Michelle to share the results of a more focused team. So, Michelle?
Thank you, Tasha. It's clear that employee engagement increases dramatically when the daily experiences include, as Tasha said, positive relationships with someone's direct supervisor or manager. So now we'd like to hear from you. What do you think are some of the benefits of working with someone who's highly engaged? So think about, highly engaged managers you worked for. Think about highly engaged coworkers you have. What are some of the benefits that you see personally from working with someone who's highly engaged? So I'm going to invite you to put your responses in the chat feature. What do you think are some of the benefits? The quality of ideas that are generated. Absolutely. Absolutely. When people get their juices going, they can really come up with some great ones. Somebody said it makes me want to be highly engaged. Yeah, it's kind of like a baby's laughter. You hear that and you can't help but laugh or smile with them. It builds stronger relationships. Yeah, we all want to have that cohesiveness at work. We spend way too much time at work to have it be unpleasant, right? You're working towards the same direction and there's no questioning. Yeah, you all have a job to do. You know what those jobs are, and you know how what you're doing fits into what the other person is doing. We've also heard people say sometimes that people tend to be more likable, or they tend to look forward to going to work. I know, from my own experience, I've had good supervisors and I've had some not so good supervisors. And there is definitely a difference in how I felt about my employment working for each. Flexibility and growth, they can recognize if someone is an amazing employee but not a good fit for their role, and will work to pivot them instead of fire them. I love that. And a lot of times people are hired, here's your job description, you're with the position for a number of years, and of course technology changes or a process changes or something else, and your job changes but the description doesn't. So it's always a good idea to make sure that those job descriptions are reviewed and updated at least annually so that you can keep track of all of those things, because you're probably doing, I would bet, a lot more now than you did when you were first hired under that initial description. And I like the idea of working to pivot somebody. So when something does change, if somebody, or let's say you hire somebody for a particular role, and they're kind of floundering, but they've got these other skills that you really, really value, finding another place for them in the organization is really showing them that you value, and it's showing other people in your organization that you value people. You're not just going to, boot them because you hired them to do XYZ and they're super good at ABC, but they're not so super good at XYZ. So I love that answer. So thank you so much for sharing those. So when your team is more actively engaged, they're more loyal, productive, but employee engagement starts at the top. Most studies show that a key employee engagement driver is, as we said, the actions of senior leaders. And that means leaders have to demonstrate support for an institutional culture that is engaged by personally living their organization's values. I mean, nobody likes to go into a place and hear a worker there or an employee of that establishment complain about the culture or the organization itself when you're there. And I think about, a time I've been in a restaurant and I overheard two servers complaining about management and within earshot of several tables. And you certainly don't want that type of thing to happen. Your philosophy should go beyond the treat people the way you want to be treated. It should be treat people the way they want to be treated. So treat people the way they want to be treated. So having an engaged team means they have a rational, emotional, and motivational connection within the organization. People are no different than leadership. Employees are no different than leadership. Everybody wants to work for a quote winning organization or a winning team, right? Leaders need to reinforce that line of sight by explaining to people where they're going, how they're performing, and where they fit in. Now, leaders cannot motivate employees long term because motivation to some degree is internal, but you can create cultures within your workforce where people can flourish and motivate each other, helping give them the commitment to help the overall organization better succeed. The goal is to not only have happier people, but employees who are enthusiastically engaged. And there are three primary behaviors that indicate your efforts and hard work have paid off, and you have a team that's actively engaged, and they are say, stay, and strive. So, say is that employees consistently speak positively about the organization to coworkers, potential employees, and customers. Stay, employees have a strong desire to be a member of the organization despite opportunities to work elsewhere. And strive, people put in extra effort and exhibit behaviors that contribute to organizational success. So, to foster a culture of engagement, you really should have, as we said earlier, a well designed onboarding program. You want to make sure you've got somebody that's a good fit. And it should include measurement and evaluation of proactive workplace policies and procedures that help to attract and retain people with skills and competencies necessary for both growth and sustainability. Now, because studies show that people leave managers, not companies, managers really should be invested in their team's success. They need to foster growth through leadership and mentoring. So we're going to go through, we've got a couple of case studies here we'd like to go through with you. And again, I'm going to invite you to share your responses in the chat box. Employee one, this is your coworker. So as a coworker, what would you do to help? Employee one has been your coworker for 5 years. Initially, he was enthusiastic and actively participated in meetings and was conscientious of his contributions. However, over time, his motivation has dwindled. He's often late and he shows little interest in team collaboration. So, he's your coworker. What do you do to help? So, again, I'm going to invite you to share your responses in the chat. What could you do to help? What could you do to help? Okay, well, I don't see anybody putting their responses in the chat, but I'll share a couple that we've heard in the past. Sometimes people will say, oh, maybe I'd meet with that person one-on-one or find out what's going on. Maybe they've got some personal stuff. Somebody else said, ask him if there's something personal in his life affecting his energy level or focus. Yeah, maybe they just need some support. Maybe, something else is going on. I'd be asking what motivates them or if there's some job duty changes that can be made. Yeah, it could be that they're not really feeling fulfillment in the job itself, or it could be that they have a sick child at home and they're really distracted with what's going on in their personal life. So it's best not to place judgment. Somebody said spend some time with him, find out what he's interested in, and get him involved in projects that get him excited. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, not everything we do at our jobs is like super fun, right? But those things that we have to do that are rather mundane, mixed with things that are super fun, can make the overall job a lot better for us. So thank you so much for sharing those. All right, and our case study number two. Employee number two has worked for you for 6 years. She's always been detail oriented and skilled at her job, often training others when invited to do so. She's known for her leadership qualities and willingness to jump in and help. But recently, she's not stepped up unless asked and missed a couple of meetings altogether. So let's assume you are this person's supervisor. What could you do to help her as a supervisor? What might you consider doing to help employee number two? What could you do to help her? And if you're having difficulty finding the chat box, you can hover your mouse over I believe the bottom of your screen, and you should see a little, or maybe it's near the top on yours, and see a little chat box. This could be another situation where somebody might have personal issues going on, or, maybe lost passion for what they're doing. Somebody said check her workload, make sure that as a hyper competent employee, she hasn't taken on too much and gotten overwhelmed. And that can happen very easily. We do have overachievers on our teams, and they do tend to bite off a lot. One-on-one conversation. Lead with how you appreciate all she's contributed over the last 6 years. Ask her if enthusiasm in her position has changed, similar to what others have said. See if there's another job function she's more interested in. Tell them you noticed a change recently. Ask if you can help. Sometimes people can be distracted with other things. I'd be asking if there's anything going on or anything I could help them with. First is to talk with her. Yeah, conversation, right? Start there. Show you care. Ask what you can do to help. What can improve her connection to the job? Or see if she needs a day off. Yeah, people are motivated by a lot of different things. And if there's a lot of stress going on, maybe it's just time to take a day. See when the last time was she got a raise. Yeah, some people are motivated by titles, some people are motivated by job opportunities, or maybe it's money. Maybe it's having more time with their families and having a stronger work life balance. If something's out of kilter there, something's got to give, right? So that can be really detrimental. So thank you so much for sharing. And so we're going to button it up with this last slide here talking about the highly engaged employee. Employee engagement is getting up in the morning and thinking, yay, I'm going to work. I know what I'm going to do. I've got a lot of great ideas. And I'm looking forward to seeing my coworkers and helping them if they need it. It's about understanding somebody's role within the organization and being energized on where that person fits into the organization's purpose and objectives. It's about having a clear understanding of how the organization is fulfilling its mission and how it's changing to do things better, and being given a voice in that journey to offer ideas and express views. That's really important as decisions are made. Employee engagement is about being included as a full member of the team, trusted and empowered, receiving regular and constructive feedback, and feeling supported in developing new skills and being recognized for our achievements. I mean, I've never heard anybody say, I've gotten too much praise at work, right? It's always a great idea to pat somebody on the back, pat your coworkers on the back, tell somebody, oh, I really like the way you wrote that document, or I really like the way you interacted with that, student, or I really like, what you've done with XYZ. I think it's really important to provide that feedback and make it organic and authentic. Organizations that have strong and authentic values with a clear evidence of trust and fairness, that's really important. You want two-way promises and commitments between employers and employees, those that are understood and those that are fulfilled. Employee engagement is about positive attitudes and behaviors, and that leads to improved experiences in your office for everybody. So, in a nutshell, engagement is something everybody can offer. As we mentioned earlier, There's the cognitive or the intellectual, where you think about your job and how you might do it better. But there's also the emotional or affective, feeling good about doing a good job. And there's also the social part of it, taking opportunities to talk about work related improvements with others, or even interacting with others outside of the workplace. And then, of course, the physical, mustering up the stamina to go that extra mile when needed. And let's face it, sometimes that can be a challenge and it can be difficult to do, especially when you're working long hours. And I know there are times of the year when you tend to work longer hours than others, and that can be a bit of a challenge. So at this point, Tasha and I would like to take any questions you may have. I don't see any at this point, but I'm going to ask our host if we have any questions.
Turn my camera back on to
Yeah.
answer questions.
Sure.
If you have any, please submit them into the chat or the questions box.
Yeah. Well, thank you
Paige has a big
guys.
smile. I think she might have a question.
I've got a smile because that was such a great conversation. And I think there's a couple questions I want to ask, but I think it's very timely. So my role, I said earlier in the day, but in case people didn't catch that intro, my role is working with our partners in the admissions offices and on the marketing teams. And there's been a lot of turnover in a lot of
Oh, yeah.
spaces since the pandemic. I think we hear that we're
Yeah.
past the great resignation, but whatever we call it
I
again,
don't
there's
know.
just, yeah, it just,
I
there's
was
a
the
lot of
director of
people.
financial aid, and I had a lot of people, a
Oh,
lot of my friends tell me there's a lot of positions out there.
Mm.
it's just, so I think this is just very timely in the sense that everyone is feeling the heat of either being sort of one of those left in the office doing the work of more people than you have and trying
Mhm.
to continue to be engaged in your work if you're one of those high achievers, or maybe feeling disengaged and like you're looking for something
Yeah.
else, or how to help your people feel this engagement. So I appreciate your conversation and talking about at every level, because I think we've got a variety of
Yeah.
people on the call today, and who are, supervisors, who are middle managers, who are maybe earlier in their career. So great conversation. And I think most of the questions that we have, you guys touched on a little bit. I do want to hear just about you guys in general a bit. So if you don't mind sharing, how did you get into this line of work, or kind of what's your background? So if people want to reach out or communicate after this, tell us a little bit about where you came from.
Sure. Sure. I'll go first and then I'll have Tasha chime in.
Okay.
As I said, I'm Michelle Schneider. I'm with the Sundium Education Solutions and I'm a senior trainer. I actually started out as a work study student in the financial aid office at the University of Toledo. Go Rockets! I then, of course, got my master's degree and worked at Virginia Commonwealth University. And then I was a director of financial aid at two small private schools, one in Northern Ohio and Thomas More College in Northern Kentucky. So, yeah, and then I went home for Christmas one year, being from Toledo, and my 2-year-old niece wasn't sure if she wanted to sit next to that lady at the table, meaning me. And I thought, well, holy cow, I have to do something different. And so I was able to take a different position. I worked in sales for a little bit and then started doing training. And I love training. I've got my master's in higher education administration from the University of Toledo, so I love to talk if you couldn't tell.
And I also come from a higher education background. I worked several years in admissions, and I worked in financial aid as well before leaving and going to student loans into the student loan industry. And I've been in the training and learning and development field for the past almost 20 years with the Syndium. So that's
Well,
a little bit of my background as well.
thank goodness for permanent hair color, right?
I think we had one question that popped up in the
Hmm.
chat, and they start with saying, not sure if this is worded correctly. That's okay. We're friends here. But the
Yep.
question is surrounding cultural competency. And so how does this impact workplace motivation, and what can managers do to continue to educate themselves about different cultures? So great question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll chime in and then I'll have Tasha chime in with her thoughts. It is important to look at different cultures in the workplace. We do a number of trainings, Tasha and I, and, we do one on generational differences. But you've got to, I mean, that's just one segment, right? Where you have different generations and the different communication styles. And I know as I said, I was a former director of financial aid, and I had students who would, they would be a no-show because, well, they didn't think that they needed to notify anybody they weren't coming in. I had people whose preferred method of communication was texting versus phone calls versus whatever. And so I think it's important to keep track of what people's preferences are if you can, because one of the things that I've noticed is if somebody, for example, sends an email, then they probably prefer you communicate back in an email, not pick up the phone unless it's something that's too lengthy for that. But there are other cultural differences too that need to be taken into account. And I think that, diversity, equity, and inclusion is huge. And Tasha, I don't know if you want to chime in on that. I know you do some trainings on that specifically. So you
Yeah,
may
that's
have
kind
some
of a
thoughts.
that's a tough one to answer in just a short period
I
of
was, yeah,
time. But I can tell you that when or leadership and does not have a high level of cultural competency, it can really not only decrease motivation and engagement, but it could also impact retention. And so it really does start with the leaders in the organization, making sure that cultural competency is something that is embedded throughout the organization, that there is a strong commitment to it, that people take the time to be open, to be sensitive to the differences, but also embrace you want to embrace the differences, but also embrace the similarities as well, and just take the time to learn. I think that's really
that's
what's
the
missing a
biggest.
lot of
Yeah,
times is just
yep,
learning and offering people grace. When maybe they are not as knowledgeable or they make a mistake as a learning opportunity, but cultural competency, in order for it to be at a high level, it must be embedded throughout the organization. It must start with leadership, and then that
at
will,
the top.
filter
And I
into
think too, the other piece of that equation is the unconscious bias that people may have towards different groups, one over another.
mhm.
And I can think of several just off the top of my head, but you know, people come to different things with a different lens. Sorry, my my device is my Alexa's talking to me. Um, so I think that those things are, you have to kind of keep that in the back of your mind that some people are coming to it with a different lens, if you will. And some of that is based on the way they grew up, and that doesn't justify it, but that's where a lot of education has to take place. A
It's
lot
very
of
important.
education has to take place.
Ongoing, continuous
Hmm.
education. It can't be
And
a
again,
one-time
it
event.
starts at the top. If the
Right.
leaders don't embrace that, it's really hard for the people who work for them, because
Hmm.
the people who work for them then might feel, okay, I don't belong here. This isn't a good fit for me. They don't value me, right? They don't value me.
Right.
So I hope that answered it, Curtis. If we failed to do so, please feel free to let
Reach
us
out to
know.
us. Yes.
I want to offer a big thank you to you, Michelle and Tasha, for a great presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
Well,
much for
thank
being
you.
here and sharing this.
We're
Hey, thanks
excited to be
for
here.
having
This
us.
is fun.
Yes, absolutely. And we
And
want
this
to
is,
thank all of you for attending, and
Yeah.
certainly wish you the best.
well, I definitely took some great things away and really, really enjoyed it. So thank you for a great way to end our first day of Innovate 2024.
Well,
Okay,
thank
well, thanks so
you.
much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a
Have a
great
great
rest of your day,
conference.
everyone.